Today's lesson is circuitous communication, euphemisms in everyday speech. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to continue talking about euphemisms, which are nice ways to say things that otherwise might be too direct or too rude or too impolite. And that's why we're calling it circuitous communication, kind of beating around the bush and not coming straight to the point because it's probably necessary to soften things up a bit.
That's right. But today we're going to learn about how euphemisms can also be sort of misused. We can use them to soften language that maybe we should be direct with because these are important topics. These are things that people should be upset about, but maybe by using euphemisms, we're softening them and we're kind of taking the sting out of situations that really need to be faced head on. We don't need circuitous language with some important topics. We do need to be quite direct.
We do indeed. So let's dive into today's subject and we'll listen to the first part and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Other times, euphemisms are less benign, such as when they're used to disguise the seriousness of something. One example of this occurs in conversations about poverty. Instead of saying people are poor, we often call them underprivileged, which suggests they're simply not getting special advantages. This term can thus reduce the urgency of improving their circumstances.
大家好，第一部分我们看到形容词 benign 表示温和无害的或是良性的。举例来说 Emery breathed a sigh of relief after hearing that the tumor he had removed was benign. Emery 听到他切除的肿瘤是良性时，松了一大口气。另外补充 benign 的同义词 innocuous, I-N-N-O-C-U-O-U-S, innocuous, 意思是无害的或是无危险的。像是 Although it looks innocuous, this is actually the world's deadliest poisonous frog. 虽然这种青蛙看起来无害，但它其实是世界上最致命的毒蛙。或是 The island is populated with a variety of innocuous species. 这座岛上有许多无害的物种。再来我们看到单字 underprivileged. 这个字是形容词，指弱势的或是贫困的。例如 Brazil's favelas are underprivileged areas that often lack basic necessities such as clean water and adequate shelter. 巴西的贫民区属于弱势地区，往往缺乏洁净的水和适当的遮蔽处等基本必需物。也可以说 The charity is devoted to helping the underprivileged. 这个慈善团体致力于帮助贫困的人们。另外，将 underprivileged 的 under U-N-D-E-R 去掉，就变成了它的反义形容词 privileged， 表示有特权的或是条件好的。像是 Rich and privileged people live in areas which have low crime rates. 有钱又有权的人住在低犯罪率的地区。接着我们看到名词 urgency， 指紧急、迫切或是急迫性。例如By the urgency in Nestor's tone, Sarah knew immediately that something was not quite right. 听见 Nestor 语调中的急迫 ，Sarah 马上就知道有什么事不太对劲。另外，将这个字字尾的 cy 改成 t， 就变成了形容词 urgent， 表示急迫的或是紧急的。举例来说 ，Simon believed that it was urgent he get home in time to watch his favorite TV show.Simon 认为他及时赶回家看他最爱的电视节目是当务之急。或是 The charity has launched an urgent appeal for funds to help victims of the earthquake. 那个慈善机构发起了紧急募款，要帮助地震灾民。
Okay, so here's the first part of our lesson for today. It begins by saying, other times, euphemisms are less benign, such as when they're used to disguise the seriousness of something, So here, benign just means kind, nice, etc. And sometimes they're less benign, they're not so nice. They're used for a different purpose. In this particular case, they're used to disguise the seriousness of something. So here we've got the verb to disguise. Be careful there. The S at the end there has a Z sound there, disguise. And sometimes, of course, you want to make something appear in a different way so people don't know you're that person or they can't recognize your voice. So maybe you're calling somebody on the phone, but you don't want them to know it's you, so you disguise your voice. You maybe talk like this. Hello, can I talk to Jane? Yes, this is Roger here, etc., etc. You're trying to hide your voice or disguise your voice.
Exactly. And of course, sometimes it's okay to disguise things. You might disguise yourself at Halloween with a mask or something, but we shouldn't disguise the seriousness of certain important topics. The seriousness just meaning how serious something is, how important something is. And here we have a good example. It says one example of this occurs in conversations about poverty. So poverty is an important and serious problem in society. There are too many people with not enough money. They don't make enough in their job. They don't have enough at the end of the month to afford to pay their bills or even buy food. So this isn't something we should hide from and run away from and disguise with sort of fancy language. We should face it directly. Instead of saying people are poor, we often call them underprivileged, which suggests they're simply not getting special advantages. Yeah, if you say someone is poor, or you say that they have no money or something like that, that's a very direct way, it's a very clear way of describing the bad situation that person or that group are in. If you say that person or group is underprivileged, well, that's obviously not quite as direct, not as powerful as saying the word poor. And underprivileged might suggest, as it says in the article, that these people or this group are simply not getting special advantages. They have enough to take care of their needs. They just don't have the extra things. When, in fact, if you're poor, you often don't have enough for what you need. You can't pay for the basic things in life, like housing and food and things like that. But underprivileged, well, if you're underprivileged, you might possibly live in the countryside. Maybe you have enough money for your daily needs, but if you're far away from the city, you don't have access to public transportation or entertainment and shopping services like people in the city might, then you might consider yourself underprivileged. But if you don't have enough money to feed yourself, you're probably more than underprivileged. And so using these fancy words can hide this serious situation.
And maybe if you are poor indeed, you don't have to feel so bad if you describe yourself as being underprivileged or financially challenged instead of just saying that you're poor. And this term can thus reduce the urgency of improving their circumstances. If something has urgency, that means it's urgent. You need to do it right away. And if you describe yourself as being underprivileged, well, maybe you can continue living under a bridge somewhere for a couple of extra months and you don't have to feel bad about that. You don't need to hurry up and try to find a job or find another way to get some money, to borrow money from relatives or something like that. So indeed, there's no urgency, there's no hurry in improving your circumstances. And here, circumstances just refers to the various things you're going through in life, which could include where you live, how you eat, where you work, etc., etc. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. It's time now to move on to the second part. Let's listen first.
Perhaps the most unethical use of euphemisms is spinning the truth into something falsely positive. Politicians use this strategy all the time to build good public opinion while covering up possible policy consequences. Sending troops into a foreign country could be framed as a rescue mission instead of an invasion, for instance. Using euphemisms in this manner can help politicians manipulate people into supporting things that they might otherwise oppose.
Okay, so the second part of our lesson begins by saying, perhaps the most unethical use of euphemisms is spinning the truth into something falsely positive. So this is unethical. It's not moral. It's immoral. It's something you're not supposed to do if you're a good citizen, if you're a good human being. Of course, we have unethical uses of euphemisms, and that's when you spin the truth into something that is falsely positive. So here we've got the word word spin. You can put some spin on something. That would be a noun. That means you kind of change it, you alter the way it sounds, or kind of change the meaning a little bit. You put your own spin on something. You interpret it in your way, even though that might not be actually true. And you can also use the word spin as a verb. You're spinning the truth, or kind of changing the truth into something that really isn't true.
Politicians use this strategy all the time to build good public opinion while covering up possible policy consequences. Yes, this is something we often see in the world of politics. They're very good at spinning things. We often call the experts who advise politicians on how to turn a sort of bad situation into what looks like a good situation. We call those advisors and experts spin doctors. These are people sort of like advertising people, but they don't advise companies on how to sell products. They advise politicians on how to sell policies or how to avoid embarrassment or things like that, because politicians, like companies, they want to have good public opinion. They want the public, that's us, to think well of them, to think that they're working hard, or to think that that terrible thing that they did yesterday was actually not so bad a thing, or that embarrassing information that came out about them was actually not that bad and really it's someone else's fault. And of course, they do these sorts of things to cover up their mistakes. When you're covering up something, you're trying to, well, hopefully make it go away, or certainly make it not as harmful or damaging to you by putting out a different story, by spinning it, by doing things like that. Because, of course, all of these policies have consequences. Sometimes they're bad consequences, but the politicians will never admit to that. What is a consequence? It's basically the result of an action or a set of actions. When you do something, something happens. Those are the consequences. Often with the word consequences, we mean something maybe not so positive, maybe not so good. We could talk about the good consequences of exercising more and having a healthier diet. You'll feel fitter and have more energy and fewer visits to the doctor. But often when we talk about consequences, we kind of talk about maybe the negative results of a set of actions. And that is often what happens when we're talking about the consequences of politicians' actions, especially the ones that make the news. These are the results of some of the mistakes and the bad decisions that our politicians make from time to time.
Absolutely. And here are some examples here. It says, sending troops into a foreign country could be framed as a rescue mission instead of an invasion, for instance. So indeed, some countries in the world send troops to other places. And yes, indeed, it does look like an actual invasion, but they might put some spin on that and say, no, it's not an invasion. It's actually a rescue mission. We're going in there to help the people, and we're not actually going in there to take over the country. That, of course, is what a foreign country might say. And I don't think a lot of foreign countries would like to say that they're actually invading another country. They're going to say something like, oh, we're defending ourselves by doing that, or we're rescuing people there. We're doing it for their own good.
That's right. We saw that most recently, of course, with Russia invading Ukraine. Most people would call it a war. Tanks were in there. People were running away. Bombs were being dropped on the cities, but the Russians called it a special military action. The rest of the world called it an invasion or a war. But the spin, I guess, allowed the Russians to feel better about what they were doing, or to explain it to their public in a more positive light. Using euphemisms in this manner can help politicians manipulate people into supporting things that they might otherwise oppose. Well, yes, exactly. They're trying to manipulate people. They're trying to manipulate public opinion as well. When you manipulate something, you use it often in a way that is to your advantage. Technically, manipulate is just to use something. If you pick up a tool or an object and you move it around and do things with your hands, that's the M-A-N-I part of manipulate, comes from the Latin for hands. You're just using it. But when we talk about manipulating people, we're not actually moving them around like an object in our hand, but we're trying to control them. We're trying to influence them. We're trying to get them to do what we want them to do. It might be as simple as telling your kids that if they do their homework, they can play computer games afterwards, or it might be more complicated, as we see politicians manipulating people and other situations like that. You're trying to use them to get some advantage or to get them to do what you want.
Or you might even describe it as brainwashing those people. Yeah, getting them to support things that in normal circumstances they would otherwise oppose. So otherwise here just refers to the opposite situation. They would not support this in normal circumstances. They would otherwise oppose this invasion. But if you put some spin on it and say it's a rescue mission, well, then maybe they'll think it's a good thing. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part, and we'll listen to it first.
As the two previous ways of using euphemistic language show, this manner of speaking can easily become harmful and dishonest. Before using such phrasing, carefully consider what you're hoping to achieve. Are you looking to save someone from the discomfort caused by an awkward or painful topic? If so, you're probably in the clear. But if you're trying to downplay the severity of a situation or twist the facts to suit your own purposes, you're crossing over into unethical territory and should rethink your actions.
最后第三部分我们看到单字 downplay， 这个字是动词，指淡化、贬低或是轻视。像是 Authorities downplayed the danger posed by the approaching storm. 有关当局对于逐渐逼近的暴风所造成的威胁轻描淡写。或者 Greg definitely needs to polish his presentation skills, but let's not downplay his talent for closing a sale. Greg 的确需要提升他的简报技巧，但我们别轻视他完成销售的能力。
Okay, here is the third part of today's lesson. It begins by saying, as the two previous ways of using euphemistic language show, this manner of speaking can easily become harmful and dishonest. So yes, on the surface it might look like a nice thing to do. Don't say that your grandfather has died. You could say your grandfather passed away or has gone to be with Jesus or whatever. Those are nice ways of saying that. But yes, indeed, sometimes using euphemistic language can actually be harmful and dishonest. You need to know what you're doing.
Exactly. So yes, what are you doing? What is your goal? What are you trying to express? You have to think about that. As it says, before using such phrasing, carefully consider what you're hoping to achieve. So before you go with this circuitous way of communicating, before you use these fancy euphemisms, these flowery words to cover up a true meaning, why are you using it? Why are you choosing these statements, these kinds of sentences? Is it, as we looked in day one, for sort of a positive or a good reason, as it asks in the article? Are you looking to save someone from the discomfort caused by an awkward or painful topic? Are you trying to cover up the embarrassing situation that you're talking about when you say, I have to go to the bathroom, or the awkward situation that might come up, or the painful situation that might come up if you're talking about the death of a loved one? Well, sure, that might be trying to avoid discomfort, an uncomfortable situation. In that case, you have a green light to use your euphemism. If so, you're probably in the clear. If you're in the clear, yeah, you have a green light. Go ahead. No problems will result from your actions.
Yep, indeed. If you're trying to be nice and trying to protect that person, then yes, using euphemisms is probably the best thing to do. But if you're trying to downplay the severity of a situation or twist the facts to suit your own purposes, you're crossing over into unethical territory, and you should rethink your actions. So again, euphemisms can be good and they might be bad. Again, the example we gave is that a country will say they're actually rescuing people instead of invading them. Instead of killing them and torturing them, you're actually doing them a favor. So indeed, you might say that to downplay the severity of a situation. To downplay something means to say something's not so important. Yeah, the electricity turned off yesterday, but that was only because this happened and we really couldn't help that, so it's not such a big deal. So you try to downplay it. You don't try to think it's so serious. And severity, of course, is the degree to which something is serious. And yeah, you just try to basically say, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it so much.
That's right. You're definitely trying to twist the facts or spin the truth if you're using euphemisms in that way. So it says at the end, if you do that, you're crossing over into unethical territory and should rethink your actions. Yeah, if you're definitely using euphemisms to try to cover up embarrassing situations, influence public opinion, manipulate people in some kind of negative or harmful way, then you've crossed over into sort of going from a good guy to a bad guy. You've sort of moved from something that's okay and acceptable and morally justified into something that is unethical, that's not okay. You're trying to hurt people, or you're trying to save people from the results or the consequences of their bad actions. And if that's the case, then you should rethink your actions. It's not okay to lie to people or to try to hide the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, if that truth is important and will affect others.
Indeed. So there you have it in a nutshell, all about euphemisms. Now it's time to listen to our Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第3部分有一个句子写到 Are you looking to save someone from the discomfort caused by an awkward or painful topic? 你打算帮助某人不让他因为令人尴尬或痛苦的话题而感到不舒服吗？好，这边有2个重点。首先句子里面它用到 look， 在这里不是看的意思。Look 当动词可以表达想要、试着要，那么之后是接不定词，也就是 to 加原形动词，去表达说计划或打算做某事。这一用法常常是用进行式 be looking to 加原形动词。举例来说 Greg and his brothers are looking to start their own business. Greg 和他的兄弟打算要自己创业做生意。好，另外文中他用到 save someone from the discomfort， 表示使某人免于感到不舒服。这个名词 discomfort 就是不舒服、不适的意思。那当我们用 save somebody or something from 加上名词或动名词，就可以表达使免于怎么样，或者是拯救、挽救点点点。举例来说 He risked his life to save a boy from drowning. 他冒着生命危险拯救一个男孩免于溺毙。那除了这样的用法 from 也常常搭配一些动词来使用，我们来补充一下。第一个呢是 protect 受词 from 加上名词或动名词，这是表达保护点点点免于什么，保护什么什么不受怎么样的伤害。举例来说 She wore sunglasses to protect her eyes from the sun. 她戴墨镜来保护眼睛不受阳光的伤害。那么第二个呢，我们可以用 prevent 或是 keep 或是 stop 这些动词，加上受词，加上 from， 再加动词 ing。 那这3个用法都可以表达出避免阻止某人做某事，或者是避免某事发生。动词 prevent 在这里表示防止、制止。当我们用 prevent somebody or something from doing something， 这通常是用在尚未发生的事情，就有预先防止的那种意味。举例来说Paul kept his dog on a leash to prevent it from attacking people. Paul 他用牵绳、用皮带把狗狗牵住，防止它攻击人。那么动词 keep 在这边则是表达阻止、妨碍的意思。我们用 keep somebody or something from doing something， 常常是用在正在发生的事情哦。那至于 stop somebody or something from doing something， 则是会比 keep 的用法语气更强烈。举例来说 The government has taken measures to stop the disease from spreading. 政府已经采取措施阻止那个疾病扩散。好，那最后要补充一下Keep 还可以用 keep 受词 from 名词的句型去表达，像 keep people from danger 就是表达防止人们遭遇危险。可是要注意，如果是 keep something from somebody， 则是表达保密隐瞒，不让某人知道某事。例如 She kept the secret from her sister， 她不让她姐姐知道那个秘密。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Disguise. She tried, unsuccessfully, to disguise her disappointment. Urgency. The urgency of the situation requires you to make a decision immediately. Circumstances. Serena's circumstances improved dramatically when she got a new job. Unethical. It would be unethical to reveal what my client and I discussed. Consequence. You should carefully consider the consequences before making your decision. Invasion. The invasion lasted for months and resulted in thousands of deaths. Manipulate. Don't let other people manipulate you into doing things you're not comfortable with. Otherwise. As a photographer, Jim tries to capture things that might otherwise go unnoticed.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. Now, here's a situation. Instead of saying that a woman was shot dead by police, a newspaper reported that a woman died in an officer-involved shooting. Now, here's the question. What might this use of euphemistic language accomplish? And do you consider it to be ethical or unethical?
That's a very good question, and also a situation that we've probably seen before. I guess in this situation, especially interesting because time is an important part of this. When newspapers are writing about an incident that happened just the day before, maybe they don't have all the facts. So saying a woman died in an officer-involved shooting is used as a euphemism, but maybe it's also just because they don't know the full facts. They don't know exactly what happened, who got shot, how did this happen, was the woman a criminal committing a crime? In which case it might be more acceptable or more justified, but if the woman was just innocently walking down the street and got shot, that might not, of course, be justified in any way. But if we don't know, I guess language like that could be acceptable until all the facts come out.
Yep, I agree with that. This use of euphemistic language should be considered safe at the beginning since it is a time when we don't really know all the facts. Although an officer-involved shooting probably implies that the police officer had the gun and the woman did not. Hence, the police officer shot the woman, but we really don't know the reason. We'll have to have the reporters further explore this topic in the future.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.